But that, admittedly, in a lesser form, happens in a lot of wars. So what differentiates a really brutal war from genocide? And this is my personal understanding based on having done 25 years of war surgery in Iraq, in Palestine, in Lebanon, in Yemen, and in Syria, and then in this genocide. The difference between war and genocide is that war uses violence on the present in order to shape the future. Genocide uses overwhelming violence, not just on the present, but also on the past to ensure that there is no possibility of a future. And this is what we've seen in this genocidal war. Half of Gaza's cemeteries were destroyed by Israel. And the reason for that is when you have nowhere to visit your loved ones, the idea, the genocidal idea, is that people are more likely to be forced out because they have no place to even visit their parents or their grandparents. 200 sites, historical sites, some Byzantine churches, some Ottoman, some Mamluk mosques, 200 sites were completely destroyed. And we're talking about the very beginning, the first 3 months of the year. And then the very fabric of society. 37,000 children have become orphaned in this war, more than the Armenian genocide. And of these 37,000 children, 16,000 have lost both parents. 14,000 women have become widowed. So that social destruction is another component of this genocidal biosphere. And so people live in an ecology which injures them through a multitude of conduits that work either independently or synergistically. So infectious diseases makes the malnutrition worse, the wounding makes the malnutrition worse, and the infectious diseases and the malnutrition in a child who's become orphaned is more likely to kill them. In a child that, in a widowed mother with no income through an income-generating spouse, is more likely to suffer or to be amongst those who suffer the worst side of the infections, the worst side of the malnutrition. And so that genocidal biosphere is what gave us 16% of the population. So the question is, why did Israel end this ceasefire if these genocidal killing machines can operate independent of the bombing? Well, I think for me there are two reasons. One, which was openly discussed within Israeli media, and more importantly, by Israeli intellectuals who advocated this back in the 90s, like Benny Morris. In that, so Benny Morris wrote in the 90s that one of the biggest mistakes historically that the Zionist movement made was to leave Palestinians in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip and the Galilee. And that successful, what he referred to as successful settler colonial project, erased at least 40 to 60% of the population, making them irrecoverable. And he alluded to the Armenians, he alluded to the increase of attacks on Palestinians inside 1948. That genocidal Rubicon has been crossed. And when crossed, there's nothing other than genocidal killing that can sustain the project. And that project is now purely about the death and the destruction, and then the final elimination of the Palestinian people. But yesterday was the 77th anniversary of Nakba. And rather than think about yesterday as the 77th anniversary of Nakba, we now understand was not an event but a process, a historical process that has taken us to this genocidal point. We have to think of these 77 years as 77 years of the failure of a genocidal project to eliminate Palestine. A failure of a settler colonial project that is intrinsically about racial supremacy, and its failure to wipe out the indigenous population, its failure to convince the grandchildren of the first Palestinians that that project was waged against in 1948 to give up their attachment to the land. The people who are being killed in Gaza today, 85% of Gaza's population is refugee, are the children who and the grandchildren of the survivors of the 1948 Nakba. Israel is fighting the people from the Lut who were expelled. They're fighting the people from the villages of the coast who were expelled. They're fighting the survivors of the massacres of 1948. And that is what gives us hope and the desire not just to continue the struggle, to have this genocide end, but also to plan for tomorrow. Talking about tomorrow, planning tomorrow, is part of the resistance against genocidal erasure. The very essence of the genocide is that there is no Palestinian tomorrow. The essence of our resistance to genocidal erasure is for us to make plans about tomorrow, about the health system in Gaza, about the schools that we're going to rebuild, about the universities that we're going to help back on their feet, about the wounds that we need to heal. That is not wishful thinking, but actually a critical component of what it takes to defeat the genocide. Thank you very much.
Okay.
We give you a minute to rest. And as we get ready for the question and answers, I would just like to ask people to raise their hands if you want to ask something, but to really think about questions rather than give short speeches if possible. So anyone would like to start?
Sorry to be the first to be person. Okay, once upon a time, a story. Could I tell you about something that would be the beginning of a speech? Only asking questions. My question, the BBC is not allowing people to say that it is a genocide when clearly the evidence is there. These are not stupid people. Why is it the BBC will not allow this genocide to be called what it is?
So the short answer is the BBC has always been the Pravda of the British ruling elite. And So that's the short answer. The long answer, which was explained to me, interestingly, by a pediatrician, consultant pediatrician who'd been out to Gaza. And she said that in all cases of child abuse, there's the perpetrator, but then there is a whole host of system of enablers that allows the abuse to continue, first undetected, and when after detected, unbelieved, then unchallenged. And that what she sees, which is the genocidal destruction of Palestinian children, 20,000 kids so far, 4,500 amputee children, the world's biggest cohort of amputee children ever known as 300 children with spinal injuries shot by a sniper. That genocidal child abuse functions in an exactly similar way. That not only is there a perpetrator, but that there is a system of enablers, and in our case, institutions and individuals, that ensure, first, that it doesn't come out, then that the victims are not believed, and then third, that there's no justice for the victims, and that they delay the ending of the abuse as much as they possibly can. The BBC has the wonderful record of being an enabler for both its own child sexual abuse predatory staff and genocidal predatory governments like Israel, which are killing and abusing Palestinian children.
I wanted to ask about what justice means for the Palestinians, because especially in the context of the ongoing proceedings before the ICJ and international law being hollowed out by the genocide and inability for any traction available from there. Is there any hope from international law for the Palestinians?
So what has happened in the last month is that the United States passed a law criminalizing membership and employment by the International Criminal Court. And today it was announced that Karim Khan, who's the chief prosecutor of the ICC, has had his and his children's UK-based bank accounts frozen. And Microsoft has blocked his email account as in response to that. So you can see that not only is there a complete jettisoning of the concept of international law by Western governments, but actually a criminalization of the pursuit of justice. And therein lies the question: if these 37,000 orphan children cannot get justice, if these 14,000 widowed women cannot get justice, if the Palestinians and the survivors, the wounded, cannot get justice, then they will seek justice by other means. And we will be stuck in yet another cycle that will take us into 2 and 3 generations. And that is the short-sightedness of Western governments. That unless people receive justice, you see, I was asked the other day in terms of what it means not to have justice. I.e., what does it mean when you walk around and you see your killers all the time? It is that the wound never heals and is as fresh in 30, 40 years that it is now. And therefore, that process of recovery and forgiveness never occurs. And things are just as acute in 50 years as they were today, and in 100 years as they were today. And what is bizarre about the Western government response to the fact that they literally have jettisoned every foreign policy tool that they have in terms of destroying UN agencies, in terms of destroying the role of international law, even local law, even national law, refusing to arrest the Israeli foreign minister while he was visiting, refusing to enact the foreign conscription law, which is a British law that prohibits British citizens from joining armies abroad when they are at war. All of this, this erosion of the very fabric of post-Second World War life, as we know it, is happening with no regard to the future. It's like a fire sale. It is a fire sale. And what this allowed, what this genocide has allowed, it has been the vehicle with which fascism has been able to accelerate its return to frontline normal political debate. So what was marginal only 4 or 5 years ago is now completely normalized, is now completely acceptable. And the vehicle with which that happened is this performative brutalism that allows the anti-humanist logic of fascism to become normalized and to find acceptance within the minds of the mainstream, within the mainstream. If you kill people brutally, purely by virtue of the color of their skin or their nationality for such a long time, that brutalism, that performed brutalism, allows a host of anti-humanist ideals and ideologies to regain their rightful place that they lost after the Second Wave. And that's what we found. That's what's happened. That's what the genocide has done. The genocide allowed ethnic cleansing to be discussed in terms of real estate deals. It allowed ethnic cleansing to be discussed as a tool of humanitarian intervention. It allowed the discussion about what constitutes collateral damage. Is it 1,000? Is it 2,000? Is it 4,000? How much really can we decide is collateral damage and how much is acceptable? It allowed some parts of the media to say, well, until January 25 it wasn't a genocide, but after January 25 it became a genocide. All of this, it's a normalization, that brutalism that everyone on this planet was exposed to functions in a normalization and legitimization of killing, of brutalism. Brutalism as the solution to surplus populations. And that brutalism against the Palestinians as a politically surplus population. We then saw by the same government in this country against economically surplus populations in the form of the disabled, who are having their access to healthcare withdrawn, and who are going to be socially killed in a similar way, because you basically say, we have surplus populations. Palestinians are politically surplus, get rid of them. These are economically surplus, get rid of them. And that is what allows the fascism to